Today we have a very interesting video because not only are we going to be covering the brand new tank within World of Tanks console, which is a Cold War one, but I'm going to talk about the speed at which they made changes because, of course, certain things may or may not have happened where they tried to create a bundle for this tank and, of course, another tank, which is the Nemesis MBT, as a duo for Tankfest for 24,000 gold, at which point this was yet again a week after when they first released the Nemesis MBT with a discount of 20% with various different bundles going all the way up to 20,000 gold. And of course, if you bought the Nemesis MBT, you couldn't then get the duo at a 40% discount. It wasn't available to you. Of course, Wargaming doing as they usually do, coming out with a way in which you can get the bundle because they realise that, people might not spend the money. And that is the core issue. Unless money is involved from the experience that I've had within Wargaming's current development within the game, not particularly the developers, by the way, because at the end of the day, the developers don't make corporate decisions, which of course run Wargaming. So the developers, I'm sure, want the best game that they possibly can, but of course they have to meet budgets and are pressured by, people who would love to see more money roll in. And unfortunately, that is what we've seen right here. They made a very quick change to essentially this, whereby if you did buy the Nemesis MBT and you wanted to purchase the new vehicle without having to spend 24,000 gold, an additional 24,000 gold that you need on your account to actually buy the bundle and then receive a discounted revaluation of the tank that you already bought, at which point you'd only get 40% of the gold value back from, for example, the Nemesis MBT. And then you would have paid an additional amount of gold in order to get the new tank, which you could have bought for an extra 4,000 gold, but in fact you'd be spending an extra like 8,000 gold or something like that in order to purchase the new tank with the new bundle, because although you do get rewarded the compensation of gold, because it's a discounted bundle, you get the discounted value of the tank, blah blah blah. So yeah, you pay an extra 4,000 gold over the base cost of the Nemesis, but then you're also only receiving 40% of the gold back that you probably purchased the tank for as well. So I thought I'd cover it, the way in which you can actually get both tanks for not having to pay 24,000 gold or buying 24,000 gold in order for you to actually have the ability to get your gold back from the Nemesis whilst also getting this tank, because remember, you still have to have 24,000 gold on your account to actually purchase the bundle in the bloody first place, which, I mean, is just absolutely ludicrous, and you should, if a bundle comes up like this, be able to just purchase the tank for the amount of gold that it would have equivalently cost you if you have a tank already. So, for example, the Nemesis MBT, say it cost 20,000. So the purchase cost of the new tank in this bundle would be 4,000. So you just pay 4,000 gold. No, Wargaming have a little trick as to get you to spend even more money with these bundles, is that you have to have the full gold amount to get a redeemed amount of gold back from the bundle. And this has been the case for a long time, but it's become very apparent that this is something that they maybe forgot about with the latest release. And they've had some backlash, so guess what? People get annoyed, people don't start spending money on the bundles, and Wargaming make a change. Similarly enough, of course, we haven't seen any changes to some of the other vehicles that we've seen in the game. That are premium tanks from a long time ago, or even some of the tech tree tanks. I guess they don't make any money, so why would they make changes to tanks that don't make them money? It wouldn't be to improve the health of their game or anything like that. No, they don't want that. They just want the money. Either way, I thought I'd start off, if you actually want to get that tank and the bundle and you want to pay the extra money, if you've already got one of the tanks and you want the other one, you can contact the support on Wargaming's website. You can submit a ticket and they will take the gold value, I believe. That was what was showcased in their article recently on the Wargaming Discord, or World of Tanks Modern Armor Discord. So yeah, I mean, if you do want them, you don't actually have to spend the 24,000 gold or have 24,000 gold on your account. So thought I'd cover it. Something definitely to be of note if you are wanting both of them. But Should you spend £69 on basically 2 vehicles in a game? No, go and buy a different game. Trust me, it's going to be a much better time investment, or go out with a meal with your family. It's going to be well more rewarding than playing these 2 vehicles. And talking about these 2 vehicles, the Desert Warrior sounds really cool, sounds amazing. The Desert Warrior, it's going to be one of the most interesting tanks. It's going to be a brutal force. Nah, this is pretty hot garbage, to be honest. The Desert Warrior has a very, very, very lackluster penetration on its standard kind of pea shooter, which it does have. It's a fully automatic pea shooter. You just hold down the RT and it's just going to keep cycling through the rounds until you eventually run out. The DPM sounds really good, 25mm Bushmaster, as with the Bradley, 4,856 DPM. Oh, that actually sounds pretty good. But remember, you have 200 pen, and basically every tank, unless you're coming up against light tanks, has more than 220mm of armor. So guess what? Your DPM drops to 0 if you're facing frontal targets that are somewhat heavy. So basically a pea shooter. As with the Bradley, these tanks definitely need some form of adjustment when it comes to these pea shooters. They are literally only good if you find the rear of tanks, and even then you can still bounce off of heavy's rear unless you're hitting directly on the backside. So thought I'd get that one in there as well. So definitely need some changes there. But of course, Wargaming being Wargaming, they wouldn't introduce a pea shooter unless they slapped on a dual barrel missile launcher. So you have 2 shots in a clip of missiles which you can fire off. And I don't really know why Wargaming keep kind of sticking to this dual kind of shell missile launchers that basically have the same intricate reload of a missile launcher as they do the full reload of the entire tubes. Seems weird to me. Why not just introduce one missile launcher that fires every X amount of time? It seems a bit silly to me. But either way, I mean, that's what they're doing, and it's not the worst in the world. So if we go down here, you can see intricate reload 12 seconds, and the actual reload time 17.94. So you save a tiny bit of time by not just keep on fully reloading every time, but it's not particularly that much of a big difference. A great thing about this tank, 65% silver earn rate. However, even when you have good games, which are relatively more difficult than if you were to use some of the other vehicles in the game, I'm talking about some of the other light tanks, yeah, it can be definitely a big problem. Remember that these pea shooters don't have the best accuracy. Their shell travel time is relatively low. I mean, it's not terrible, but it isn't particularly fast enough that you can hit a lot of targets on long ranges, unless of course you're using different variants of ammunition. And even then, both of the variants of the Bushmaster are pretty slow for a Cold War vehicle when a lot of the engagements are further away, and then the accuracy is very good, but the bloom is horrendous when it actually moves. And also the fact that when you're firing off, you know, rounds after 0.3 of a second, you're basically at full bloom all of the time. So hitting things not particularly the easiest when you're on one of these, which makes it a very close quarters engagement vehicle. But given that this tank is a light tank, you'd be wondering, well, of course it can stealth up against people. No, this tank is gigantic. It's absolutely massive, which means that the concealment factor of this vehicle is horrendous. And when you have things like the Weasel, what is the point? This tank is basically a walking, talking hitbox, and everybody knows it, and so they are just going to focus you. For example, this is the AMX 1390 variant, or AMX 105 variant, the AMX 13 SS11 TCA, which is also a missile loading light tank with a kind of pretty interesting thing. Main armament as well, it gets 180 damage versus the 30 damage that you get with the Bradley variant, the Desert Warrior. And yeah, you definitely notice it. I would much rather play the AMX than I would the Desert Warrior. I would much rather play the TCM AGS than the Desert Warrior. You kind of get my drift. There is a lot of other vehicles that are basically the same sort of thing, except why would you play the Desert Warrior? And I think that that is the key question that I don't think I can answer. There is not really anything that I would say is worth actually using. And even when you look at some of the similar sort of vehicles, the M3A1 Bradley, the secondary weapon of the Desert Warrior does have a pretty decent amount of damage at 1,300, but it gets increased penetration over the Bradley, but it just feels like these two vehicles really missed a trick, and they don't feel very good in the game. And when you've already broken Era 3 anyway, then yeah, I mean, try fight a Weasel with one of these, where your bloom is horrendous and there's horrible server delay. I just don't think that this tank is very well suited to the current meta within the World of Tanks console. So hopefully that's given a brief overview of the tank, but I guess we can showcase a gameplay, albeit it's a fairly okay gameplay, but it's pretty boring as well in terms of the playstyle that you have to play, because although this tank is supposed to be a go in and deal damage, if you do that, everything pens you, and once you fired off your missiles, you're just sitting around doing nothing. Now, the game that I have to showcase to you is on Nomonhon, and this map is... I mean, it's Nomonhon. On Cold War, it's basically a camp fest, whether you sit on one side of the hill or the other side of the hill. There are places where you can go if you're in a more brawly tank with a bit of armor. You can push on the left and right hand side from where we are right now, down in the city. So that is the south of the map. And on the north of the map, you can push there as well. But it pretty much becomes a bit of a camp fest, whereby everyone is basically sitting where I am or sitting up on the hill behind me, and on the enemy team sitting where they are. And this is, as you can see, the kind of Bushmaster. Firing off a few rounds, 220 pen. Most of the mediums / heavies or MBTs, whatever you want to call them, have pretty decent armor, and they're going to just pump you. Now, unfortunately for us, the Stormer's going to go for us, and we can't really get out of the way. It's just your classic case in point of using a missile launching vehicle and playing up against another missile launching vehicle. And yeah, we didn't even trade that well, and that's because the kind of intricate reload is good, but you're doing so little damage compared to some of the other options as kind of the fast firing rounds. You can end up like not really outputting the damage that you might hope for, because essentially the DPM consists of both the outlay speed as well as the reload. The reload on this is pretty quick, but then the intricate reload is not insane. So it works out that the tank just feels a little bit lackluster. You really have to be going for kind of the tracks area or through the tracks and into the armor, but even then a lot of the time you'll get absorbed by spaced armor that's surrounded by everywhere, and you simply do not have the penetration to go through spaced armor. And so you can see here, just trying to get in a couple shots here and there, but remember that everyone can hit you back for a ton of damage, and unless you got the missile launcher, you are not going to do a whole lot. Case in point, when you have absolutely terrible aim and can't use missile launchers, could have got another like 1,300 there, but unfortunately for me, I can't use missile launchers. And yeah, let's forget about what you've just seen. Trust me, we will hit some missiles later on, and I'll use my big brain strats to actually make them work. But here is where you can potentially pen, but remember the shell travel speed, remember the accuracy that I was talking about. Well, yeah, I mean, it isn't great, and a lot of the time people aren't staying still when you're playing in this mode when they're closer to you, so you don't pen them, and or you can't hit them as reliably because the accuracy. And then even when they are still, when they're further away, which is typically when people are stopped or not doing a whole lot, you can then just get pumped because it's just going to fly miles away from where you're aiming. Now I realise here we are slightly penning this guy, and so yay, finally we get a bit of damage. I swap back to the missile launcher here. Now we start to aim, trying to aim just underneath the spaced armor there where we can pen, and at this point no point swapping to the missile launcher. So you can get damage, but as you see, a lot of our damage is just coming from people being silly and not because we're innately able to deal with a lot of tanks. And as soon as you try and deal with a lot of tanks in the game, you'll find that you just can't. And if I consider that you'd have to spend £69.99 in order to get 25,000 gold, and therefore half of the price of that if we were to take the Nemesis and this one as the same price, which they aren't, but you know, just for the sake of convenience, it would cost you what, like £35 for this vehicle. And considering that you can buy, you know, some pretty good DLC for a lot of games, you can buy games overall, paying for this tank, I don't think it's fun enough. It doesn't offer a whole lot different to what you can get in the tech tree. It's worse than a lot of the tech tree vehicles in some regards. You have, you know, BMPs and stuff like that that you could use, and it's not really a novel and unique new playing style, and it pretty much will be more annoying to you, I feel like, or it was definitely for me, than if I was to just play another style of tank or another tank that has better main armament in the not having the Bushmaster and getting missiles at the same time. And I think that is the core crux of the issue when it comes to these tanks. Now this is where I use my big brain in order to not get spotted. I pull behind the corner, fire off the missile, and then pull out, and then we can see where we're aiming. You can do it as well. Yeah, it does work. As you can see here, we don't get spotted. If I was actually out there, we probably would have got spotted. Trying to loop the shell over there, probably very unlikely that we'd actually hit. But you can see here, the piece cell is coming out. Now, I could have swapped to the Bushmaster, but at this sort of speed, it's just a pain to actually hit reliably, and we'd probably only hit and not pen. So, yeah, that is what it is. We've got ourselves a Marder who's come in from behind. And this is where you get to see what it's like when you come up against another tank that is similar to this sort of vehicle, but, you know, has the same characteristics. It has a missile launcher, it has a main kind of pea shootery style gun, and you can see here we land a couple of hits there, putting him on 72 health. We're on 188, and we see that he's coming up, and we set off our rounds first, but you see how quickly the rounds come out of the Marder. I mean, what are you going to do? This tank has a hinge clip reload of 0.3 seconds to do 30 damage. So in a second, you're dealing 90 damage, basically. It's just slightly over that. But the Marder is just going to spam you, and in the shorter period of time, even if it takes a longer reload, it's going to do more damage. And so a lot of the engagements you come into aren't going to be as good as you might like. We picked up 7.3 thousand damage, 1500 assist, and 103,000 silver, which wasn't terrible. But considering this has a 65% silver earn rate, and given the fact that, you know, we were using a lot of premium missiles, it's not awful. But is it worth the money? Absolutely not. I think this is a bit of a lazy design of a tank that we pretty much already have in the game as a premium, and has much better tech tree equivalents that I would rather spend my money on. So if I was going to say to buy any vehicle in the game, it definitely wouldn't be this one. So hopefully that gives you an indication of both the controversy surrounding this whole bundle and the previous tanks as well, and how to get them, as well as actually talking about the tank itself. So if you like the video, make sure to like it, and of course subscribe down below if you aren't already. And thank you to everyone who is subscribed and anyone that's actually watched this far in the video. So thank you, and I will see you in the next one coming soon. Tankfest is soon. Goodbye.